Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Ave Maria Press Professional Development Webinar Series. We're sorry that we started a few minutes late here. We had a technical difficulty, but hopefully that's all resolved. Our goal in this series is to provide parish staff, volunteers, and diocesan ministers the formation, training, and tools needed to create vibrant Catholic parishes and growing ministries. In today's webinar, Katherine Angulo Valenzuela will discuss how to embrace both Hispanic and American cultures in your ministry with young people. Oh, hold on one second. Okay. My name is Erin Pierce. I am the Parish and Curriculum Marketing Specialist at Ave Maria Press. Before we begin our webinar, we would like to recognize our webinar partners: the National Conference for Catechetical Leadership, the National Association of Catholic Family Life Ministers, the National Association for Lay Ministry, and the Catholic Campus Ministry Association. Everyone in the audience is muted today, but you are able to ask questions. Questions may be sent to our presenter using the questions section of the GoToWebinar panel, which you can see displayed here. And I'll read as many of those questions as possible at the end of the presentation today. This webinar is being recorded, and a link to that recording will be sent to you later this week via email. With that, I would like to welcome and introduce our presenter today. As the Program Director of the Thriving in Ministry initiative supported by Lilly Endowment, Katherine works to prepare pastoral leaders for long-term ministry in the Church and also directs the Bishop John M. Darcy program in priestly renewal. She has more than 19 years of experience in youth ministry. Before coming to the McGrath Institute, Katherine served for 4 years as the Associate Director of Youth Ministry at the Office of Formation and Discipleship for the Archdiocese of Atlanta. She is also on the Board of Directors for the National Federation for Catholic Youth Ministry. Katherine, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Erin. It's truly an honor to be able to be with all of you. Hello, everybody. Hola. My name is Katherine Angulo, and I hope during this time together we are able to explore a little bit of, through my experiences, what can be helpful for your ministry, especially with the wonderful youth that we have, the youth, adolescents, and young adults that we have in our parishes.
Katherine, I'm just going to go ahead and close out my camera, okay? And then I'll come back on when you're done for questions. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Erin. So I hope everybody can see my screen now. This is just a picture to let you know that I work not only with the Hispanic community, but I have the opportunity to work with the youth from many different cultures. So some of the information I'm going to share with you today might be helpful also when you are working with different communities in your own dioceses or parishes. The first opening is that we need to remember that we are called by God to declare his glory among all the nations, his marvelous deeds among all his peoples. And this is very helpful for all of us that are working in ministry. If you are in the Office of Hispanic Ministry, your priority, yes, are the Hispanic youth and young adults, but you also have to be aware of the other needs of the youth in your diocese. And if you're working in what is considered the Anglo Office of Ministry, then just realize that every step that you give in your ministry should also reflect benefits and fruits to the other cultures that are represented in your community. So how do we deal with this? How do we deal with different cultures? This is a picture I actually took of my brother-in-law and my nephew not too long ago. They were trying to put some sort of oil in the car, and I was inside of the car laughing so hard. As you can tell, my brother-in-law is going back to the manual of the car, and my nephew just went to YouTube. So guess who won? It was my nephew. And what I want to do with this graphic is to just help us realize that the message itself, the good news of Jesus Christ, is exactly the same 2,000 years ago, right now, and 2,000 years from now. However, the challenge that we have in front of us is that we need to develop new skills to be able to communicate in a practical way that new message that message to the new generations, so it's applicable to them, is coming from their heart and their minds, so they're able to understand and live their faith in a stronger way. So throughout this presentation, I'm going to divide my training in 4 different parts. The first one is the definition of some terms, so we have a clear foundation of the kind of ministry, the work that we're going to be doing today. Then I'm going to give you a mini cultural training of what I wish someone told me 20 years ago when I studied in ministry, to help us understand about how the church works based on culture. Then we're going to quote a little bit of the statistics and why is the urgency to be able to be aware that we need to serve our Hispanic youth. And then at the end, we're going to be, I will be sharing some stories of the youth telling me what is it that they want to hear from us, the church, for their realities that will make their message a lot stronger. And finally, I will give you a few ideas, concrete ideas of how you can implement this in your own ministry. So the definitions I'm going to give you right now, I saw in a cultural training given by Darius Villanovos from the National Federation of Catholic Youth Ministry. The first word is culture. Culture includes the idea of groups that might have and express certain characteristics similar, like behaviors that are attributed to that community, and also include material dimensions like food, dress, dance, costumes. When we talk about multicultural ministry, is the existence of multiple cultures in a single community of geographic area. But then when we talk about intercultural ministry, is the reality of different cultures that interact and engage one another in a way that welcomes and respects the difference among them. Being intercultural is what we strive as Catholics because it's universal. We are different cultures that can work together to strengthen the whole to be the body of Christ. This is what we are seeking for in the future of our ministry in the church. Why is this important? Because we need to start from some basic information. The first one is that the Hispanic culture itself is not just one culture, it's multiple cultures. The reality of someone from Mexico is completely different than the reality from someone from Colombia or someone from Argentina. And all of them are Hispanic. So that's why serving the Hispanic ministry community is not as easy as it seems. Also, we have a difference of needs according to the generations of this Hispanic community. If they are first year generation or second year or third, it's a complete different needs that they are going to express to us in the church. And when we have the communication with the community, we are able to figure it out what kind of ministry they need under that big umbrella of the Hispanic community. And then it's also difficult to figure it out because according to the area that you are located in, the church, the Hispanic church is either more developed or less developed. And that will create other challenges to realize when you are starting a new ministry. So with that in mind, I'm going to start with some practical concepts that I wish I knew when I started ministry here in the United States with different cultures. Some of them are of language, some of them are the cultural challenges that we see. So this is something I wish someone explained to me at the beginning of my career. These are generalizations, so not everybody agrees with this, but it's gonna, I think once I explain it to you, you might be able to understand where I'm going with this. For the Anglo community, the church is actually the building. Why? Because the Anglo community understands that the priests come and go according to the regulations of the diocese every 5 years, 10 years, every 2 years. But the building is what they keep because they stay in the same neighborhood. And that's why they invest so much in the building. That's why they care so well about the building of the church. That is their property. That's part of their community. That's what they consider their church. For the Hispanic community, the building itself is not that as important because for the Hispanic community, the church is actually the priest, meaning as long as they take care of the priest, they know the church will be okay. They know Mass can be celebrated in multiple locations if necessary, but that's why the interest is always directed towards the priest. And from the African American community, the Vietnamese community, their priority is not neither the building or the priest, it's actually the community. That's why it's so normal that to see these communities travel long distances every Sunday just to be able to celebrate Mass with their community. Now, I want to make a clarification. The fact that each culture sees the church with different lenses doesn't mean that one is right and the other one is wrong. The three of them are correct. It's just the emphasis that they have because of the way that they are used to interact with the church is just a little bit different. The realities are a little bit different. And if we understand that to start with in our ministry, then we will know how to communicate the same message in a way that will be more effective. Another interesting view. If you talk about the Anglo community, most likely when they see Christ, they say, if I follow him, I will be okay, meaning I will go to heaven. If I follow Jesus Christ, I will go to heaven, I will be okay. And you can see that very clear in many of the parishes that were built between the 90s and the 2005, where the majority of parishes built a redeemed Christ, not a crucifix, because of that glorification that we are expecting. Now, with the Hispanic community, if you see the arts, it's completely the opposite. They like to see a Christ that is truly suffering. Sometimes it's even hard to see some of the crucifix that exist in the parishes in Latin America. But it's because the Hispanic community looks at that crucifix and said, if he suffered that much on the cross, then he understands my pain. This is helping us see how to also enhance the Christianity that we are sharing with these communities, the evangelization that we are doing. The Anglo community, they have it right. Yes, if we follow Christ, we will go to heaven. But we also have to remember that he asks us to carry the cross and follow him. For the Hispanic community, they're very good at understanding the carrying of the cross. But we also have to send a very strong message on letting them know that you also deserve heaven. Heaven is waiting for you. So God doesn't just want us to suffer in this world. He also wants us to be happy. He also wants us to interact with people and to have a joyful life. So those are two messages that we need to emphasize once we're doing ministry with these communities. Now, I have the privilege to serve these two families. One is an Anglo family, the other one is a Hispanic family. These are our beautiful Catholic families that we have all around our parishes. What I see in the Anglo community when I interact with them, especially with the families, is they always ask me the question, why do I have to believe and where do I belong? In a sense, many times when I interact with the Anglo communities, especially those that are minorities, minority Catholics in the area that they live in, they kind of are tired to be part of the less popular parish or the less popular church. And part of that is show us that they have a lack of understanding of the universal church. Yes, you might live in a zone that being Catholic is not a priority, but that doesn't mean that you are not part of the universal church. If you have that concept a little bit more clear, the ministry and the way to you understand church will be completely different. Now, for the Hispanic community, I usually hear that that's not for us and I can't participate. When they say that's not for us, it's because whatever activity the church is offering is not connected emotionally to them. For example, St. Patrick's Day celebration. There can be big celebrations in many parishes around the nation. But for the Hispanic community, St. Patrick's Day is not a big day for us to celebrate. So that's not for us. And the I can participate is because many times the timings that we select to organize these parish events are not connected to the realities of the schedules of the Hispanic community. So they immediately eliminate their participation because they say, I can participate on that. Now, something that we're seeing in the Hispanic community is the lack of self-esteem. The lack of self-esteem of understanding that they are an important part of the parish. And many times that is because of the way that the behavior of the parish towards the Hispanic community. For example, by giving them the worst spot for the Spanish Mass, or by being asked, for example, one time I went to a parish and all the signs related to cleaning were only in Spanish, that were not in English. So you are already treated as a less of a parishioner in your own parish that you have helped build. So that's some things, some concepts that we need to start to work on when we are working with the Hispanic community and the Anglo community. Another part that I'm complaining in reality that I hear all over the place when I'm talking about the Hispanic community is, but they are always late or they don't sign up. Well, it's not because of maliciousness. Actually, it's part of our culture and who we are. One of the very popular sayings in the Spanish culture is that we say, mi casa es su casa. My house is your house, which means that we cannot even conceive the idea that if someone comes to my house, you are not welcome and you are not going to be served whatever it is to share for food. So there is another popular saying that says, donde comen donde comen tres, comen seis. When three eat, we can also feed six people. Or what we do is we put more water into whatever it is that we're fixing. Or everybody gets a smaller part of the meal, but everybody will be fed. Because of that cultural traditions, for us, the idea of RSVP or to arriving on time or to letting you know with time in advance that we are coming is something that is not very natural. Because in our minds, if I show up and actually I show up with 10 more friends, that is actually a courtesy towards you instead of a disservice towards you. The way that we can start to work on these little details that can create so much frustration among cultures is just to help in a very gentle way communicate to the people the importance that if we can plan better, then we will be able to take care of everybody in a better way, especially for events that involve food or special reservations. What are some of the challenges that we're embracing with the Hispanic community? We have language barriers, especially between adults and teens. One of the biggest mistakes that the church has made, and we hadn't realized because it wasn't intentional, was that when we were not able to communicate to the parents, we started to communicate just with the children and ask the children to translate. But to the point that our attention was just towards the child. And when that effect started to happen, not only in the parish, but also in the school and the banks and everywhere the parents were going with their children, in a sense, that took away the role of being a parent to the kids because they became the ones that were making the decisions. They were the ones signing the papers. They were the ones making the translations of the part of information they wanted to translate. And that has created a challenge for the generation of teens that have parents that don't speak the language. So we are having that issue between the parents and the teens, not only in language, which means communication among them, but also the family roles to understand what is to be a parent and what is to be a child that is only 8 years old by making all the big decisions of the house. Also, we have the parents working 2 or 3 jobs with no time for the family. That's not only happening in the Hispanic community, but it's very prominent in those communities. We're having intergenerational conflicts between parents and kids. And it's not because family is not important anymore in the Hispanic community. On the contrary, we know that family is indispensable in the Hispanic community. But the difference is that the parents cannot relate to the reality of the teens that are experiencing here in the United States, and the teens cannot fully relate to the experiences the parents have in their country sort of origin. So there is a discrepancy there. There is a lot of gaps, and there is not a facility to travel back and forth between the two countries, so they could be exposed to the reality. We also have a strong desire of the parents to keep the culture with the children, and that's very vital for our Hispanic community. However, many times the way that we're approaching that cannot be the healthiest way. For example, one issue that I'm seeing often in parishes is that the parents are sending the kids to catechesis in Spanish with the hope that they will learn Spanish that way, when in reality, Spanish should be learned at home. And then if the child wants to learn in Spanish, they should have the classes to be able to do so. But if the child doesn't know the language, they shouldn't be expected to learn the language and the teachings of the church at the same time. It will be very hard. It will be very unfair to the child. Issues involving immigration that have created expected treatments, the lack of opportunities, etc. This, unfortunately, has increased tremendously in the last 2 years. I have a story with a student that was in a high school dating an Anglo girl, and the girl from prom decided to make a huge sign that said, Juan, would you like to go to prom with me before you and your parents get deported? This was a public school, and none of the teachers took that sign down in the cafeteria. So this kid was extremely hurt. But the worst part is when he went back to his house, he said to the parents, it's because I look like you that I'm being treated like this, because he actually is an American citizen. He was born in the United States. Those issues, although we see them in the news or we hear them here or there, of being denied of service, or now with the situation in El Paso that you are being hurt because of your nationality, are creating a significant pain in the families for the parents and for the teens, and that's something that we need to start to look at it. Lack of education. One of the dreams that we should have as a church is to be able to offer our Hispanic youth as many opportunities to obtain education, especially now that we have flipped and the majority of Hispanics teens are born in the United States, so they do have the right to go to school and to just achieve a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, a PhD if they're interested. But many times we have parents that don't know how to apply for those schools, or what kind of paperwork they have to keep for them to be able to have the forms ready for them when it's time. And if we don't put some emphasis and create some ministries around that need, we're gonna lose the opportunity of hundreds of thousands of young people that should be receiving education, have the right to receive education, but they just don't know how the educational system works here in the United States. So now we have a new generation of Hispanics here in the United States. This requires new awareness. So I'm going to give you a few statistics right now. Nearly 90% of the Hispanic teens of religious committed parents have never attended religious retreats or religious summer camps. Only 25% were currently involved in youth group. If you think you have a lot of Hispanic youth in your community, I can assure you already, you probably only have 25% of the reality of the number of potential that you have in your community. This is created for many reasons. The first reason, and the most real one, is that youth groups, the concept of youth groups, are not very common in Latin America, because the experience of church happens as a community, through your school, through your neighborhood. So the specific call of youth group is something that doesn't make them feel familiar with, so they don't participate. That's why one of the first things that we need to make sure we say is not youth group, but actually to call it youth ministry. When we say youth group, we're already excluding someone. And when they hear the word group, they don't feel that they belong. But if they hear youth ministry or young adult ministry, then they feel that there is a better chance for them to participate in that event. Another reality is that Hispanic and Latinos, and this just came out this past summer, Hispanic Latinos make up more than half, 52% of participants in lay ecclesiastic ministry formation programs via diocese, universities, or centers of the ministry development. This is great news, because many times people believe that the Hispanic community didn't want to learn or didn't want to be catechized. And now we finally have flipped the statistics, the percentages, and we're showing that now we're majority going through these certifications. So for all of you that are looking desperately for volunteers, your best bet is to invest in the Hispanic community, train them, let them learn, because they are very thirsty about learning more about their faith, and you will have fantastic volunteers coming up, starting with the youth, young adults, and their parents. Hispanics younger than 35 with their gifts and talents contribute more than half of the Catholics in the United States. This is another reality that we're embracing. The majority of Catholics in the United States right now are Hispanic. We're in 50-something%. That is great news. That has given us a lot of hope. During the fifth encuentro, when I was in Texas with 3,000 leaders from around the nation and all the bishops, It was energetic to see the joy and the enthusiasm of the Hispanic young adults that want to make a difference into the church. And that's wonderful. However, what we are doing right now is not enough for the demand. What we are doing right now is not enough for what we should be achieving right now as a church. So we need to challenge ourselves. If you are already doing a lot, then I want to encourage you, you need to do more. If you are not doing anything, I want to warn you, it's time to do something. In the last year, I have been called to 2 specific dioceses where the majority of the parishes flip to a majority of Catholic in a year. That's very uncommon in the way that the parishes life works in the United States. To have entire dioceses to switch to majority Hispanic in all the parishes in the same year is very significant. And it's not to scare us, on the contrary, it's to make us joyful that our church is growing in a very significant way, but we do need to prepare to serve them well. Why? Because this Pew Research just came out that said that only 47% of the US Hispanic describe themselves as a Catholics, down from 57% just a decade ago. So in 10 years, we have already lost 10% of the potential of the Hispanic community in the Catholic Church. That is very significant, especially because in a sense, the Catholic Church does have a hope that the Hispanic community is going to be the one that is going to help them strength in the future. But because we are not putting enough resources, enough time, enough people capable of leading the groups, we are already losing 10% of them in a matter of a decade. So here you are working with the young adults and the Hispanic youth. What to do? What are they saying? How we can make a quick difference? Number one, in Cristo Vive, Pope Francis invites us to say the young people are not meant to become discouraged. They are meant to dream great things, to seek horizons, to aim higher, to take on the world and the challenges, and to offer the best of themselves to building something better. Our Hispanic immigrants, this is Lucero. She came from Mexico when she was 8 months old, illegally, and her dream is to be a teacher. But unfortunately, she doesn't have the paperwork to be able to go to a school. In any of the programmings that we're offering nationally for the youth or for the young adults, we are not putting in front and center the story of an immigrant. Is your parish, if you are aware that you have immigrants in your communities that might not be up to date with their paperwork, do you have any kind of ministry for them to be able to find hope? Do you know how to answer to the questions? For example, like the question that Lucero did to me of saying, why if I didn't make any mistake and I have behaved well my whole life, it looks like I will never be able to have a future in my profession? And that was a very hard question. Actually, I didn't know how to answer it. It took me 3 years of walking an accompaniment with Lucero to be able to figure it out, the answer. And it came from her. And she said, Catherine, if I look back in my life, I didn't have a chance to be where I am right now. And yet God took care of me. So he must have a plan for me for the future. And that really blew my mind away. Is your ministry taking care of the real questions that the teens, or especially the Hispanic teens, have in your parish? And our beautiful quote from Cristo Vive is, the love of the Lord has to do more with raising up than knocking down, with reconciling than forbidding, with offering new challenges than condemning, with the future more than the past. This is Daniel, and Daniel is the second child of a family of 4. So it's a very small family, mom, dad, brother, and sister and brother. He was a 7th grader, and he wanted to receive the sacrament of First Holy Communion because although his family went to church every single Sunday, they forgot to send him to the preparation to receive his First Holy Communion until he requested it from his parents. And of course, the parents were kind of surprised. They actually asked him to go and find the photo album to see all the pictures from his First Holy Communion. And then when they started to look at it, they realized they completely forgot. That's happening with a lot of our families right now. They're so busy and they haven't put as much emphasis in the sacramental life of our church that they just get dismissed, and he figured this out when he was in 7th grade. The problem is when he went back and asked for the training to receive the sacrament, and he was asked to go and work with the 2nd graders to prepare for his sacrament. This is something that we cannot do anymore. Pope Francis is inviting us to don't judge the families where they are where they are, then just start to walk with them and minister them so we can take them to where they're supposed to be without any kind of condemnation. And on the contrary, remember that our church and our faith is all about the return of the prodigal son. So every time someone comes back, we celebrate and we rejoice. No, get upset and let them know that they're already way behind in their catechesis. Another quote is, I encourage communities to examine, respect, and seriously the situations of the young people I'm sorry, I cannot read the whole message right now in front of me, but I encourage communities to examine respectfully and seriously the situation of their young people in order to find the most fitting ways of providing them with pastoral care. The fact that our teens are Hispanic doesn't deny that they still are teenagers or they still are young adults that are struggling with the same struggles that a lot of our Anglo teens: depression, suicidal thoughts, anxiety, bulimia, bullying. All those issues are also going to the Hispanic community, but many times we don't have resources that will be able to connect to their reality, either by language or by example. And that's something that we need to start to stretch ourselves as professional leaders of the church so we can provide those resources. If you don't know who is a great family counselor in your area, contact your dioceses and start to get their names and the numbers. So when you have these serious cases of where our teens need a more professional help, you have someone in hand to be able to connect them to so they can receive the help that they need. Many times because they are Hispanic or because they just attend the pastoral juvenile program, they dismiss the opportunities of all those resources that sometimes the church has and that we should make very available to them and their families. The ideological colonization is especially harmful to the young. We also see how a certain kind of advertising teaches young people to be perpetually dissatisfied and contributes to the throwaway culture in which young people themselves end up being discarded. This is the reality of our youth, especially our Hispanic youth, because of the new environment in politics or even just the status in the country or the difficulties of their family financially or even logistically has created a lot of pain in them and is creating a lot of stress, unnecessary stress, but nonetheless real stress in their lives. How we can make sure our youth are being taken care of and they can have a smile and a hope for the future. But aside of that, in addition to that, we have to understand that we have a new generation of teenagers that are in an environment of violence by bullying or violence by the massive shootings that are happening all around the nation. That is a concept that for a teenager is very hard to grasp. And for that reason, they can go from complete joy to complete desperation very quickly. So make sure in the ministry that you're offering to your youth, remember that you're almost talking to traumatized teens, just like we are traumatized by all the realities that are happening. And that we need to be very sensitive to the way that we communicate with them the good news of God and how they can see God in the midst of all these challenges that they have ahead. Another beautiful quote from Pope Francis is, young people can offer the church the beauty of youth by renewing her ability to rejoice with new beginnings, to give unreservedly of herself, to be renewed and set out for ever greater accomplishments. The beauty of the Hispanic young adults, the Hispanic teens, is that they bring so much joy to the church. They are the ones that scream to the top of the lungs, esta es la juventud del Papa. This is the youth of the Pope. And they are very excited to make a difference. This is Eduardo. In his parish, he heard for many Sundays that they were lacking of catechists for the 2nd grade students. And he was a very prominent sport athlete in his school. And after hearing that announcement for so long, he decided to quit the sport that he played in the school, in his high school, to be able to be the catechist for those 2nd graders. You will think that he was celebrated and complimented by that amazing move, but actually he was mistreated tremendously because he was the best player of the team, and the school wasn't very happy that he walked away to, as they said, work with some second graders. Well, what an example. And one time he got so much feedback, negative feedback from his high school, that he had to stand up and said, it's because I come from a community where the male role models are not very common, that I cannot allow this new generation to pass without someone that will catechize them and prepare them to receive their first Holy Communion. So what an example of these young men. And I assure you, around the entire nation, there are plenty of young Hispanic teens and young adults are making a huge difference in the church, and we need to celebrate and support them so they can be successful in their ministry. Pope Francis also said, let us steer clear of young people who think that adults represent a meaningless past, and those adults who always think that they know how young people should act. Instead, let us all climb aboard to the same canoe and together seek for a better world with the constantly renewal momentum of the Holy Spirit. This is Monsi. She is a second-generation Hispanic here in the United States. And she was embracing a lot of challenges between the reality of her parents and her reality growing up in this country, to the point that it was becoming a very strong conflict until she had the opportunity to go and visit her grandparents back in Mexico and then understand her parents a little bit more. This happens a lot in the parishes. There is always that conflict of, it should be this way because we are this culture or we are this family. What the Pope Francis is inviting us for the adults, Hispanic adults and Hispanic youth and young adults, is to come together and have a dialogue and respect everybody's voices. The important part is that the good news is transferred from one generation to the other. How? That can be very full of potential, of ideas, of possibilities. So we cannot block ourselves just like, because I experienced my faith in Costa Rica, that means that my faith in the United States for my children had to be Costa Rica style. They can have very huge influence of the Costa Rican style, but the reality of your child is also another reality that should be in addition to the culture that they already love and they are so proud of. It shouldn't be diminishing that. And for those of us that organize programming, we have to be very respectful of the cultures that are represented among our students. We need to learn about them. We need to ask them questions to see how they connect emotionally to their faith. Then Pope Francis asks us, when we pray, we open everything we do to him, and we give him room so that he can act, enter, and claim victory. Prayer is such a critical area of our faith and so important for our youth. This is Jari, and Jari is a girl that also first generation Hispanic here in the United States. And it was very hard for her to connect to her faith until one day she was invited to be part of the choir of her parish because she has a beautiful voice. And she started to act very fully into this new role, serving with music. And she was fantastic, but she didn't know much. Her family didn't know much about the liturgy. So little by little, every Sunday, she started to learn more and more and more about her faith, to the point that Christ became real to her through the music and to the ministry that she was serving to the community. The Hispanic community especially is very connected to music. It's in our blood, it's in our DNA. And we cannot deny those opportunities of expression of worship to our creator in the language and in the rhythms and with the forms that we are so connected to in our faith. So for example, if someone asks me, what kind of music would you use, Katherine, if you have a group of teenagers to talk about God? And I will say, I would use Lord, I Need You from Matt Maher. That will be almost a guarantee. Or I will use this Secret Silence from Esteban Grisano, or any of the musicians that I have here. There are a lot more, but these are some that I'm almost guarantee teenagers would understand. However, do you know the music and the musicians that will connect with the Hispanic community? Here are some songs I suggest with some singers that I suggest from the Hispanic community. I know you will have this in a video, so then if you're interested, you can take a picture of or make a copy of these songs and these musicians. For you to start to include that message, that opportunity for the Hispanic youth to connect I must confess, I'm fully bilingual. Actually, English is my third language. I'm trilingual. And whenever I have a need, whenever I have a very serious situation in my life, most likely you're going to see me on my knees praying in Spanish or singing in Spanish, because that's the language that God created me in. And that's when I feel that I'm talking heart to heart with God. Most likely our Hispanic teens, they have this. And it can be from a very soft and gentle songs from the past that are connected to the roots of our culture, or it could be very creative, energetic with the new rhythms, like, for example, the Aquí Estoy from Father Rob Galea and Ivan Diaz. It has all the spectrum, just like in English, but always make sure you present these opportunities to your young people. To close, it's interesting to see how we are challenged with the Hispanic community, but I don't see it as a negative challenge. I always have seen it as a blessing. And what we need to eliminate is that we have a collection of tumbleweeds. Bishop Cantu from Las Cruces in the fifth encuentro talk about this plant that looks very robust, but whenever some winds come through, because the roots are so small, it can take them away. The numbers of the Hispanic community in your ministry, in your diocese, in your region, I'm pretty sure they're growing, and they're growing significantly. And that can be overwhelming and make us have a sense of security that we're going to be okay. But the reality is, if we don't invest in the Hispanic community, we are going to have the challenge that all those souls are going to just roll away in the first wind that comes through. So let's give them the opportunity to connect emotionally, spiritually, from their heart, from their mind, from their soul with God, that they have that personal encounter. So we will have a dynamic, a strong Catholic Church for decades to come that will enhance the church in the United States, that we will no longer be seen as something separate, but as a very fruitful community that is active in the ministry, serving one another for the good of the all. So this is my presentation to give you a generic idea of practical ideas that you can receive. Now I'm open to any questions if you have
Thank
any
you.
for me.
Thank you so much, Catherine. This has been such an eye-opening presentation, and I'm sure that so many on the line, so to speak, can relate to these personal stories of these young people, probably ministering to some that have similar circumstances in their life. I
Mhm.
encourage everyone now to send in any questions that you might have for Catherine. I do have a couple here already from Ellie. Do you know how many dioceses have youth ministry groups? Are they kind of multicultural? Are they focus only on Latino kids? How do you minister to teens in English or Spanish? What do you recommend?
Okay, that really depends. Yes, there is Hispanic ministry and Anglo youth and young adult ministry in every single diocese, even by name. Now, how strong those teams are, that depends of the area that you are in. But yes, ministry exists in every parish. It does exist. How you start youth ministry? I think a very good document to start with is the document from the USCCB, renewing the vision, that talks about the 8 pillars of youth ministry, that helps you understand that youth ministry is not just catechesis or just evangelization. So it will give you the 8 pillars to understand how a ministry should be based on what is the foundation. And then from there are plenty of publications that are excellent. Actually, in youth ministry, we are in good shape. Hispanic youth ministry, we still have a long way to go. But that can be used for the everyday gatherings that you do with the youth and young adults.
Okay, thank you. One person said, like myself, many teens feel they're neither fully Hispanic nor fully American. They feel that they are both. How do we balance incorporating both cultures into youth ministry?
Yeah, and that, I will say, that's the number one question I get everywhere I go, especially as a diocesan director when I have that role, is what language should I use for the youth or the young adults? My answer to all the leaders is always whatever language they are able to fall in love with. Because if they are not able to say, I love you, I need you, forgive me, I don't understand, in a clear way, they're not going to be able to have a clear communication with God. So what I always encourage parents is allow the child to speak the language that they feel more comfortable with when they're learning about God and when they're talking about God. But culturally, make sure you involve all the traditions that you have in the culture so they have that emotional connection to their roots and to who they are. Because what we need to emphasize our Hispanic youth is who they are, so they feel their self-esteem is high and they know and they're proud of who they are under the creation of God. God created them with that culture. I'm a very proud Mexican Colombian girl that lives in the United States. Happen to be redheaded, but that's just God's creation. There's nothing I can do there. But that's what we need to emphasize to our new community. So give them the freedom to learn in the language they feel more comfortable, but never stop giving them the cultural background that is so important to us.
Hmm. Trisha said, great answer. Wow. Okay, let's see. Got lots of questions coming in here. In my diocese, Jocelyn says, we are for the first time doing a conference with the Anglo community, but the Hispanic youth are doing their own programming in the same space, and we will all have lunch and mass together. How do I best help integrate both communities during the lunch and mass?
Um, it will be ideal that each side hear the main concerns of the other side. For example, if you have the story of an immigrant teen, to help them understand why for example, something that happens very commonly in youth ministry is the concept of mission trips. Parents many times get upset why they don't, the young Hispanic community don't attend mission trips. And this happened to me when I was in a parish. A parent of the Hispanic family came very upset saying, what do you mean that I'm gonna pay for a whole week for my child to go to another town to paint houses and not get paid for doing that? And I was like, what do you mean? We're doing service. And he said, what service? But you're making, this is cheap labor. That's what you are getting. And I was like, so I didn't understand his mistrust. And then I realized he's a painter. So of course, from his side, he was thinking, you are making them work and not pay for them. Why are you abusing my child? But then I have to give them the component of service and the teachings of the church. And then when the father was able to understand, he was my first supporter. Actually, he was sessions of training us how to paint actually better a house. A lot of those misconceptions happen. So sometimes when we help the other side see the reality, the true reality of our families, that's when a lot of understanding happens. I did have one time a group of Hispanic teens that had the parents without papers talking to all the youth and their parents about why they came here. And at the end, many of the parents that identify with the parents that were speaking, and they say, if that was my reality, I probably would have done exactly the same. And they became friends, and I could see them saying hi to each other after that event. So by exposing the stories of life, you will see a lot of growth between both communities, and that's what you want to build, connections.
So that opportunity for dialogue.
Yes.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, Yalen says, I grew up in Hispanic community, and when I became an adult, I wanted to be involved. However, my Hispanic community did not allow us to help or volunteer. Catechists are still the same people. I am now 47. I had to move away in order to stay connected to my Catholic faith. How can we change that?
Would you mind repeating that one more time with the phone a little bit closer to you, please?
Yes, yes, I'm
Sorry,
sorry.
thank you.
She said, let's see, let me go back here. That she grew up in a Hispanic community. When she became an adult, she wanted to be involved. However, she wasn't allowed to help or volunteer. She says, catechists are still the same people. I'm now 47. I had to move away in order to stay connected to my Catholic faith. How can we change that?
Yeah, and that's actually a very critical challenge that we have right now. in the Hispanic community, and that's why I read one of the quotes from Pope Francis that said, "The church that works under the understanding that only the adults know what is good for the youth and not hear the youth, or that the youth thinks they know everything and they don't know the voice of the adults, that is not going to work." Why? Remember that discipleship happened at all age groups. Not all the disciples were the same age. Some of them were very young. They, God speaks through us through all generations. So what we need to make sure is that the ministry that we're developing is not ministries that are creating our own kingdom of the way of praying the way that we like, but actually that we are creating disciples that are capable to do the work and that we are no longer needed. Every time I start a job in the church, I always say, let's see how long it takes me that where I'm no longer needed. And not because I'm not doing the job, but because I have trained so many people to do my job so well that I'm no longer needed. I can move on and do something different. That's the mentality. That's true leadership. That's true discipleship. Overall, what we are doing is we're building disciples. And to create disciples, that means you have to give them ownership to the leadership of the church.
Mm. This makes me think of Pope Francis when he said in Christus Vivit, right, that the young people should be a protagonist in
Yeah.
their own story.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he also asked the young people, make noise.
Yes,
So stand up and make noise.
that's right. That's right. Deacon Juan says, just a thought. I have found that ministry to Hispanics should be seen as a gift to unwrap instead of a problem to solve. Intercultural encounter, when done with education and respect, enriches both cultures. I often say, I'm a blessing to you, and you are a blessing to me.
100%. And actually, that's my last slide. So whoever said that, you read my mind. Let me show it to you. Wait. Here is the connection of the best words.
Mm,
Words. When people ask me, Catherine, why you keep trying to create this bridge between the two cultures, I always say, just picture this. If the Hispanic community is able to teach the Anglo community the determination and the generosity towards the sacraments, just picture how much stronger our faith will be. But on the contrary, if the Anglo community teaches the Hispanic community the level of discipline of catechizing our youth between sacraments, just picture how much stronger our church will be. And I will even add the African American and Filipino and Vietnamese cultures. If the church, if they are able to teach us the level of commitment to the community that they have under the Catholic Church umbrella, just picture the type of church that we will have in the next decades ahead. That's what excites me. That's why I completely agree with the last comment. When we say challenge, it's because that's how people see it. Unfortunately, that's the word that I always get approached with. But I see it with excitement because this is very promising for the future of the church. If we are able to just develop these skills, this is not even a cognitive issue. These are the skills of just getting to know each other. So then we can see how God has presented in their lives, in their cultures, and gain that treasure and include it into our own realities. We will become a much better Catholics for the future.
that's wonderful. I'm going to go ahead and take back presenter mode from you so that they can see my screen. Thank you so much for spending this time with us today and dealing with these little technical difficulties that we had. It was worth doing it this way. I'm sure everybody who has attended feels the same way. For all of you on the line here, please know that the webinar has been recorded, and tomorrow you will receive a link to the recording so that you can use it for future references or share it with others in the ministry who you know. Next week, we will be talking about the gift of Catholic social teaching with Father Kevin McKenna. So please join us then. Thank you all. Thank you, Catherine. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.